See, Senator Babet has a problem in that he probably thinks that I'm talking to all of you, an audience, and he probably thinks that I'm playing some sort of political game, but this is actually not the case. We come from a framework of law where we have already stood in this arena for 15 years and defined on multiple court records in multiple states and territories, including the New South Wales Supreme Court, that defined a separation of curial powers. And what this means is two crowns on the table, a St Edward's crown and an Australian imperial crown forged by Anzac and anchored in the Stone of Remembrance, in the Shrine of Remembrance, in the very king's domain of that realm, the United Kingdom of Australia. And this is where Senator Babet is refusing to address what is already on the Supreme Court of New South Wales court record, and instead treating this like a political game and thinking that the law won't catch up with these people. And that is far from true, because I don't think we're going to stop now that it has grown so large in numbers of queries that there are probably now lawyers and solicitors across this country readdressing what they believed as their truth and now looking at the actual criminal offences of what would be considered a foreign curial power in executive branch government. And if those criminal offences do turn out to be international criminal offences, i.e. war crimes due to war theatres, then it's only to say that they should be held liable to the full extent of that international law. And I'm sure justices like Justice Lonergan would uphold that law fully to the extent that they have put this on the court record already. And having defined the international war crimes of a New South Wales police force and a New South Wales magistrates court system, including New South Wales Correctional Services and Forensic Mental Health New South Wales, wherein United Nations inspectors were denied access by these facilities, knowing that their war crimes were specifically put on New South Wales Supreme Court record by a Supreme Court Justice of New South Wales. And Senator Babet, this is where we come to. We're not come to you with politics, and we don't come to you with hearsay. We come to you with absolute fact, and we come watching every single move you make. And we come with response to your statements of untruth. Rather than being a liar, I would not say that, because you've been very, very, very careful so far with your words. Rather than not being a liar, I would say you're an untruthful man, you're dishonest, you're dishonourable, you're disgraceful, you're without any of these things, allowing paupers to remain as paupers and failing to guardian them in any way, shape or form, and instead treating them like the working class. That in itself is a crime, Senator, a crime. That is called slavery, Senator. It's absolute slavery, Senator. And we can go about this as many different ways as you like. But the law is finally catching up with what would be considered a foreign curial power under the Great Seal of Australia, still proclaiming on the TV to be somewhat sovereign in a land it stole sovereignty from Aborigine and constitutional Australians. Not only did you steal sovereignty from two different peoples, you proclaimed to hold it over those two peoples for yourselves. So, we let Senator Babet continue in his little ranty rant of propaganda manipulation on the plebeians from his patrician seat. let him go. Let's hear what the rest of what he has to say.
How do you find it being within Parliament itself and working with other senators? Do you find that they want to actually work with people that come from different parties with different ideas and they actually want to communicate openly and freely? Or do you find that they really close ranks around just their particular party and vote in unison?
Yeah, look, the major parties close ranks. The major parties, I like to call them two wings on the same bird. So in Australia, we have the Labor Party and the Liberal Party. These two parties cooperate and work in unison on every single issue of true importance. Like you mentioned before, the misinformation bill that's coming through Australian Parliament right now, and also something similar going through the NZ Parliament. That bill was originally floated by the Liberal Party, which is our traditional centre-right party here in Australia. It didn't get up, thank God, but that bill, the idea behind the bill has now been grabbed by the Labor Party in Australia, which is the traditional centre-left party. So this is an example of how these two parties really work together for the disadvantage of the average person at home. So what I'd like to say to the Australians that might be watching this reel or this broadcast or whatever it ends up being is that the Labor and Liberal duopoly, which what they really are, do not have your best interests at heart. In fact, in my opinion, they can't stand you. So I would say to them, move away from voting for these two major parties and look at your minor parties instead, because your minor parties are more authentic, they're closer to the ground, and they actually care, most of them actually care about the future of our country. So that's very important for people to understand.
What is important for people to understand is that he did not mention once that a member represents you. He talks about parties, registered corporations with party lines, i.e. corporate lines. And this is where their corporate donors come in. This is where all the advertising and everything comes into play, because they're corporations and they probably have ABN numbers and constitutions as corporations under the Corporations Act 2001. Is a corporation allowed to run for Parliament at all? Aren't we supposed to be represented by our local members across the country? And how is that occurring if parties stand up and take party line over and above a local representative who might want to speak for his community? And we had the word community come out of Senator Babet's mouth earlier. So he's acting like he's part of a community, but separate from them, because he only takes part in that on the weekends. Remember? On the weekends.
What are your top 3 issues heading into this year? Well, we're already halfway through this year, but what are some of the main key issues that you think everyday average Australians are facing on a parliamentary level that they might not know about?
Yeah, obviously at the moment, front of mind is the disinformation bill. That is huge, because if you say that the government can decide what is mis or disinformation, and you say that the government has the right to remove that content from the internet or from podcasts or from website, etc., that's a very, very dangerous thing. Because you've got a government right now that you might agree with, but what happens in 5 and 10 and 15 years and 20 years when those laws are in, when a government comes to power that you may not agree with? That's very, very dangerous stuff.
Very, very deluded thing to say, given that you talk about lockdowns and mandates and misinformation bills, and all fail to recognise what's defined at law. At law, Senator, you all talk about this story waffle crap, but never ever address the actual laws at which you are obligated to follow. And that means international and federally. So when do we get to the following the law part, Senator, instead of all of this rhetoric?
The next thing is obviously cost of living. We're going through a huge cost of living crisis right now. People are genuinely suffering from economic mismanagement. And the third thing is probably this whole net zero agenda that we have going on right now. The whole net zero agenda, the elite, the people that run the world right now, they like to say, it's about saving the world. But, we'll save the world if we tax you more. We'll save the world if we give you more regulations. We'll save the world if we take away cheap energy. It's absolute madness. What it really is it's a way to centralize power and give the people at the top of that pyramid more and more control over your life. And I'll give you a fourth one as well. I know you didn't ask for it, but I'll give you a fourth one.
Right, so Mr. Bullshit Artist, what is the Reserve Bank Act 1959? What is the Currency Act 1965? What is manipulating the currency supply? What is manipulating the trade routes worldwide to manipulate the currency supply? What is a military siege? And what are they doing to our economy again? Who's doing that to our economy? It's what? A fraud? Negligence? Did you say it was negligence? Or would that be fraud? Would that come under the Accountability Act 2013? Or would that just come under the rules of usufruct on an international stage as a bunch of war criminals? I'm just trying to fathom how you can sit there and speak like this, Senator Babet, knowing that there's a more intelligent Australia out here watching. And you all think you can get away with this long term, given what's going on in the Ukraine right now and what you did in the port of Lebanon blowing up some fertiliser and what you did in the Ukraine by mining the harbour so that the wheat couldn't get out. I mean, these are all food bowl things, Senator. It seems to me like a military siege is going on while you play around with a foreign money supply. Might the two things be linked together somehow, Senator? Telling all these people to disobey the Constitution over a cost of living while you created this cost of living. I mean, that's the disgrace here. It's your faults in the Senate there. It's called mismanagement. It's called negligence. It's called fraud. It's called deceit. And if you're unaware of any of these things, we can just call it sheer incapability, which would come down to that one word, incompetence, Senator. Incompetence at law.
Fourth thing that I think is really important that people understand right now is the central bank digital currency. Now, for people out there who may not know what the central bank digital currency is essentially programmable digital money, where the government will know exactly how much money you have, of course, where you've spent it, what you spent it on, where it's going, if it's coming in, if it's going out. And because it's programmable, they can decide what you can and can't do with your money. I'll give you one example. So they might say, okay, yeah, you've spent too much money on red meat this month. And because we've signed up to this net zero agenda, next month, because it's going to take up too much carbon, you can't have red meat. Or, you want to buy an international flight, but you can't because your international flight emits too much carbon. So I think the central bank digital currency is one of the biggest things that people need to be aware of right now in our country.
Let's just ignore the fact that it came out of a central bank instead of the Treasury. Let's just ignore that fact for the start. Because if it came out of the Treasury, it would be what? Gold and silver coinage like pre-1965 currency. But because we don't have gold and silver coinage in the supply under the Constitution, Section 115, we've got the Reserve Bank under the Reserve Bank Act 1959. And then we've got a new currency under the Currency Act 1965, which is a 2-to-1 ratio on gold to 1, I think. And then they fuck around with that with a note, a Federal Reserve note, right? And then that is a countable money supply. So if you think they are going to watch your money, they already do through AUSTRAC. Every single transaction you make is already monitored, managed through AUSTRAC. And if you're on the Centrelinks with the EBT cards, everything is then double managed because you can't buy things like cigarettes or alcohol on your little Centrelink card. And then if you're on the robo-debts, then you get paid that whole entire thing double because you have to pay the debts on it as well. And this is the entire system that Babet's set up and willingly sitting there. We can't have them install more slavery because that would be technical illegal slavery, because that wouldn't be voluntary servitude. That would become involuntary servitude, Senator Babet, and technically an international war crime that would be considered slavery. Forced servitude, right? To get a morsel of food in one's belly and then have their lifestyle controlled by a reserve bank, a central bank. And you're talking about freedom and sovereignty. What sovereign country runs from a reserve bank, Senator Babet? A sovereign country runs from their treasury, Senator Babet. Now, if I pull out this 100 that I've got in my pocket here and I look at that little Anzac and that crown on that 100, Senator Babet, and I look at the signatures on there, is there a signature between the Treasury and the Reserve Bank? And what would that mean in this whole entire debacle that you're trying to hide under the table while you're talking about digital slavery? Digital slavery with digital IDs, where you expect everyone to carry a phone around with them. That's a slavery on its own. Just expecting someone to have some sort of electronic device so that you can identify them. Are they cattle, Senator Babet? This is what it comes to. And you thought that Australians were dumb. You thought this was an idiocracy that you could sit there and treat them like plebs. And the funny thing was a lot of them woke up and they started to realise who you were and who you worked for and what you were actually doing and what you were actually doing in the Ukraine and what you were actually attempting to defend on this video and doing a very fucking bad job of it. A very bad job of it, Senator Babet.
If people are concerned about this, what can they do to actually take a stand against it? Because I agree, centralised digital currencies are a real concern. They're a concern around many countries around the world. But what can the average everyday person actually do?
They can do a lot. So what they can first and foremost do is take a greater interest in the political process. And if they already have an interest in the political process, what they can do is they can make their friends and family aware of what's happening right now in our nation, of the issues like the CBDC and social credit scores and all these kind of things. So the things that I would ask people to do right now that understand the problems and understand what's happening is don't be quiet. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues at the water cooler at work. Share the information that you have. Because right now we live in a country where people are afraid to speak up. They're afraid to be the nail that stands up because they know they're going to get hit with the hammer. They've got to forget that stuff and they've got to speak, which goes back again to the disinformation and misinformation which we talked about earlier, where government is trying to restrict speech. So be brave. Courage is contagious. Don't let the system, the government, or whatever it is, anyone else silence you. You need to speak.
Oh, and speak I am, Senator. Ring the AFP immediately, Senator. It is time to follow the law. There is treason going on in this parliament to oaths that were taken. There is treachery going on in this parliament. There is apartheid going on in this parliament. There are international criminal laws being broken in this parliament, including torture, forced medical procedure, and forced servitude. These are all crimes, Senator. And you sit there with this a glee look on your face, an arrogant look on your face of patrician status, talking down to a bunch of working class. Now, to everyone else, you said, what's the answer? The answer is not politics. The answer is to recognise these politicians have been stealing the money from your Crown estate. The answer is to stop using their Reserve Bank currency and read your Constitution. At Constitution section 115, it says that all debts must be paid in gold and silver. It doesn't say anything else. The only way to pay a debt off according to law is with gold or silver. If you use a Reserve Bank currency, you are borrowing off this nanny who can then dictate the policies of of how you use their money. You have to stop using their money supply and go back to the constitutional silver money supply that you had in circulation in 1966 before these assholes turned up and lowered your Admiralty ensign and kicked Gough Whitlam out. Your answer is there. Your sovereignty as a people is in being able to stand up with a treasury and not rely on the money lender in the temple flying this blue ensign that's behind Senator Babet at the moment. He's telling us to stand up and speak the truth. Well, I'm telling you that this man's being lying to you. All you have to do is look at the picture that I'm using as I speak my words, and that was taken from the Great White Fleet painting book of 1908, demonstrating the sovereign realms flag of the Commonwealth of Australia at the arrival of the Great Fleet in 1908. They are lying to you. Senator Babet is clearly sitting there as a patrician state and treating you all like the working class while you use the money lender's money and not your own constitutional money supply. Your legal standing to not be paupers is in using value money instead of debt money. They will continue to see you as paupers at law if you do not return back to the constitutional gold and silver under Section 115 of the Constitution. If you doubt me, go and look at the Currency Act 1965. They are treating you like the poor, the working class, a pauper, a pleb. Now, go and look up the word plebeian and think about the plebiscite that they gave you on same-sex marriage when they know full well that any marriage act would have been denied by the sovereign under law. And that's why they had to go down the route of corrupting your society with a plebiscite instead of a referendum. And now they're trying to create a treachery in this referendum, a fraud. And I pointed very clearly out the criminal offences that are going on within the Prime Minister's and Cabinet at the moment, Prime Minister and Cabinet Department and the Federal Executive Council. Senator Babet, this is now out on the table and on the Supreme Court record that there is not much you can say in response to a Supreme Court justice. Okay, that this is the bottom line here, in that you can no longer continue to speak in this manner as if we are the idiocracy when we don't want idiots running our government anymore. And technically, we don't want war criminals running our government anymore.
And if you speak, if you spread your knowledge, things will change. And obviously, this goes without saying, volunteer and join a political party. It doesn't have to be my party, but join a party that aligns with your values and get out there and become a part of the process, a part of fixing things. Because if you just sit at home and you're quiet and you're silent, nothing will change and it will just keep getting worse. And then your children will one day wake up in a country that you don't recognize anymore. And because they've grown.
You mean the country we live in today, Senator Babet? That you changed on us since when we were children in the 1970s and 80s. You mean this very country today that we're now standing up and speaking up against? The very curial power that came in here, treated us like children, stole all of our assets, stole our mines, forests, fisheries and agriculture. You mean that very government, Senator Babet? You're asking us to volunteer and join a criminal mob, a foreign curial power under a foreign oath of allegiance that you yourself took, Senator, and now we recognise as being foreign to the Stone of Destiny, or Stone of Scone as they call it, which travels between Scotland and England and is not the Stone of Remembrance in the King's Domain in the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, Senator Babet. Right, so you're talking about creating an act of treachery against the Commonwealth by joining a foreign power in this land, going against our foundational laws. No thank you. Take your foreign oath, take your foreign crown, and somewhat fuck off is the basic answer here. The Aborigine don't want you destroying all their bullshit anymore, and we don't want you destroying our constitution anymore. We'd like to go back to living on the land next to them and not having you manipulate our lives anymore with your foreign money lenders, money supplies. This is how you manipulate the world, and this is coming to an end because you just created the most heinous international criminal offences on a world stage, and you're continuing to do it in the Ukraine, Senator Babet. The excuses, you just don't have any anymore. And you can speak as much rhetoric as you like on a world stage. I'm telling you right now that legally, at the law, is going to catch up with you all. This is not politics that we're addressing here, Senator. I'd suggest you go and read what's on the Supreme Court record, because we ain't backing down from it anymore. You committed heinous international criminal offences. You tortured people. You force medically procedured people long before COVID was even a thing, Senator, and it is now catching up with you. Your rhetoric while you sit there will not cut it anymore. And Pauline, I bet you're listening in as well. You should have spoken up when you had the chance to speak up. I ain't stopping. This goes towards a courtroom, Pauline. You're all criminals according to the Criminal Code 1995, and you're all criminals according to international law, and it's gonna end. This rhetoric and this bullshit and this manipulation and this foreign curial power that thinks it has sovereignty here has been caught the fuck out, guys. It's time to realise these things. Your war crimes are catching up with you all.
Grown up in the system as it exists at that time, to them it will be normal. And a generation after that, and a generation after that, et cetera, et cetera. And, one day in a few generations, children will be living a complete dystopian nightmare, and we won't know how they got there. So do something.
He's talking about it like it's the future, when this foreign curial power did this exact thing to all of you today. Today. And Senator Babet is under oath to the thing that did that to you today. They have undermined your country since 1967, and everyone should look at how and why Gough Whitlam was removed from power. What is the Great Seal of Australia, which is not, I repeat, not the Great Seal of the Commonwealth of Australia? These people have usurped your power from you and are now mocking you over what they have done to you in the last 30 to 40 years, and saying to you, if you don't watch out in the future, it'll happen to you in the future, when they've already done it to you today. And anybody that's over the age of 30 should sort of recognise what their life used to be like in comparison to what it's like today. The very power that he's talking about is the very power that he works for.
What made you want to get into politics?
I've always been interested in the political process, but what made me really interested in politics and wanting to get my hands in there and get stuck in is the overreach of the global elite. The global elite have always existed. They've always wanted power, and fair enough, I can understand that. But they've created a world today where they just want to step on the throat of the average everyday person, and they're just pushing and pushing and pushing it, and it's just getting too much. And I had to stand up and do something about it. And I had to say, you know what? We understand that there will always be, a global elite, and there will always be the average person. We get that, but you can't keep pushing like this. And what really, really tipped me over the complete edge was the global response to COVID.
The bullshit is just unbelievable, isn't it? No concern for what his government did to bring you to today. And I'll use one very specific word. It's called privatisation. Now, to give you an example, Telecom Australia still exists. It is the very people's asset. You own the telco network in this country. It is under the rules of usufruct. The administrator has use of the fruits. It then privatised your asset into an administrative body called Telstra, and then sold you shares into that administrative body called Telstra in T1, T2 and T3. So now you run the administrative body that is the privatised body of which you're not really an asset holder. You're just a shareholder for performance rather than a primary shareholder that owns all the assets, because the state owns all the assets and you own the state. So it's kind of like a monopoly board on your very own assets that they're using to manipulate a money supply out of you in a fraud called administration under the rules of usufruct. And it became a fraud the moment they started committing criminal offences. And this is the moment where we now get to address these senators for their crimes and for failing to do the right thing in relation to the monetary supplies. Some would call that negligence. Some might call that fraud. Some might call that defrauding the money supply.
Because anyone who looks at COVID for more than 10 minutes really understands what COVID was. COVID was a way to centralize power. COVID was a way to get more control. COVID was a way to take away from the working class and give to the global, and I keep saying global elite because that's the best way I think to describe these people, to take from the working class and give to the global elite.
So, our senator, bound by an oath, under a duty at law, has just admitted that his very own government that he is under oath to is responsible for international war crimes. Now, this shuffling of monetary through a company at which was given immunity, that's another thing altogether. And that's what he's trying to allude to. But he's just opened the door to the fact that they're a bunch of fucking war criminals. He's just admitted it. He just openly admitted that the Australian government are a bunch of fucking war criminals. I mean, there's no other way around it now. Every bit of evidence that I put down on the table for the last 15 years and more has now come to fruition as being absolutely true. And this is the disgrace that you are now, Senator Babet. You've just confirmed everything I've put on the court record as being true.
And when I saw that happening and I saw everyone falling into line, I said, either they're scared to speak or they don't understand what's happening. And I, as someone who understands what's happening, I have to get in there and I have to basically wave the flag and say, follow me. I understand what's going on. We need to do something to save our nations.
So what's going on? You understand it, or do you? What are the rules of usufruct, please, Senator? What's a pauper, please, Senator? What's a foreign curial power, please, Senator? That you know what's going on. Like I'm willing to debate you in an open forum. I'll do it on a stage at a podium. How about that? I'll do it without books. How about that? I'm really like to know what's in your mind here. Like you're proclaiming to know what's going on. Do you know you work for a foreign curial power under a foreign flag and a foreign oath? Do you know that? Or do you proclaim to be some sort of sovereign here? Where do you proclaim to get that sovereignty from? An act of law or some sort of lineage with God? I'd like to know, Senator. You're under oath here and you have a duty to a parliament to speak the truth in the matter. Now, the truth's on the Supreme Court record, and I'm asking you for a debate, Senator, because you're acting like you know it all, and I've proven to everyone that you're a liar. And I wouldn't say a liar, I'd say untruthful, like we said before. I'd say dishonest, because you're not being honest, are you? You're skirting around the truth, aren't you? You're not addressing the rules of usufruct that might appear under Hague Conventions at which you have turned into a bunch of bloody criminals. And you think we should just sit here and put up with it? You think we should just sit here and put up with it? Sadly mistaken, Mr. Babet.
Final thing, before we wrap up, is there any last minute things that you would like the people of New Zealand or Australia to know about yourself or about the UAP?
Look, the UAP and myself, we will always fight for what is right. We will always fight for traditional conservative values. But what I'd like to say to the people of New Zealand is that you're not alone.
Senator, we're the naked owners here. We didn't give up our estate. We grew up as sons and realised that you'd treated us as we were lost at sea. So make no mistake that we're not, and I'll repeat this, we are not traditional owners. We are the naked owners of the Constitution, Senator Babet. And at law, there's a real problem, because you're acting like Supreme Court record don't exist, and you're acting like Anzac don't form part of the picture here, and you're acting like the people haven't figured this out yet, and you're acting like you have some sort of patrician status over and above this working class. So we get to this kind of conundrum that we bring the law forward towards you and kind of expect a real answer from you now, instead of this, what we would call in Australia as a colloquialism, this bullshit.
The things that are happening in New Zealand at the moment are happening in many other Western democracies. And why is that? Why was the COVID response exactly the same in New Zealand as it was in Australia, as it was in Canada? Why are the same misinformation bills and disinformation bills being passed at the same time in New Zealand as they are in Australia? Why is that happening? It's because the world is not controlled by the people that you think control the world today. Your politician, your average politician in your parliament right now is a puppet.
Bullshit, 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 bullshit. A COVID task force commander is not part of the parliament. He's under the command of the Governor General. So that would come down to a foreign curial power and a foreign oath of allegiance, Senator Babet. So what you're about to say about a two-headed snake in Liberal Labor, well, we saw Greens take party to that, and we know all about Clive Palmer. So it's just a little bubble show, isn't it? This Canberra bubble that you are party to, that you're not letting the people know the truth of the matter, are you? And it will catch up, because they're waking up to the fact that you took an oath to a foreign curial power. Consider that. And Lydia committed treason under King via Casement 1917 and Section 44 of the Constitution. So no matter which way you look at it, Senator Babet, it's time to ring the Australian Federal Police and uphold the law.
They are a puppet. They take their orders from someone else. They take their orders from globalist interests. Those people are, like the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the WHO, etc. All those globalist organizations. That's who they take their orders from. These people are unelected. They are unaccountable. They could not give a stuff about you or your nation.
You mean like an Australia Act and the usurpation of power of the states into a foreign curial power? You mean taking away the power of the people into a foreign curial power, a power that you took oath to? That's kind of bizarre that you're saying that they're obligated to all of these things, but you can't see what's greater on the stage that is probably what you took an oath to at the peril of your own life. This is the reality of things that we recognise now, Senator Babet. And you're not talking to a bunch of plebeians anymore, Senator Babet. We're silver-holding people who recognise that we don't want to be paupers in our own land and nannied by a foreign curial power who treats us as poor and keeps us as poor and treats us in slavery. This is the recognition that all the people have come to while you continue to lie to them right now on a video.
So I would say to the people of both of our countries, I would say, take a greater interest in the political process. Do something about it and stop voting for the establishment parties. The establishment parties are there to give you the illusion of choice. There's a party on the left or a coalition of parties on the left, and there's a party on the right or a coalition of parties on the right. These people are establishment lackeys.
Here's the harsh reality, Senator Babet. If you vote for a foreign curial power in your land, you are deluded. You are taking part in what is considered to be, at law, a delusion. It is defined on the Supreme Court record as a delusion. You are participating in a delusion. You are enforcing a delusion upon the people of the Commonwealth of Australia, and you have done that throughout this entire video, Senator Babet. And it's catching up with you. This is the reality of it. I can't stress this enough. I tried to stress this to Pauline. You should go and watch all my videos because I come from a standing of law. And you're asking me to speak up and not shut up. Well, I ain't shutting up after 15 years of watching this sad debacle of a country argue with itself and whine and complain about all manner of stupid things instead of address the very problem that's being put on the table right now. And Senator Babet, it's very clear that that oath and that foreign curial power that you're linked to has committed heinous international criminal offences in Ukraine after committing them in Afghanistan and likely in Syria as well. We could go all the way through the actions of Tony Abbott and George Pell. We could go through the actions of John Howard. We could go through the actions of what happened to Turnbull and the stabbing in the back of Gillard and Rudd too. There's an ongoing game of factions inside this government trying to control the people as slaves. And the reality, Senator, is that a foreign curial power is now being defined on the court record. This is where the standing comes and the reality of a prerogative right to our Constitution comes into play, and the recognition that your only foreign administrative powers that don't have a right to undermine the Constitution with referendums or the voice in the very first place, and to recognise that the return of usufruct in the situation of a criminal offence or fraud would mean returning all of the performance of that usufruct as well. Senator Babet, back to the people. And that would mean stopping the privatisation and closing down all these companies at law, Senator Babet, which is well within the prerogative right of the royal and direct line of authority to that Constitution, Senator Babet. This is the reality that you're actually coming to after you continue committing international criminal offences all around the world, Senator Babet, all around the world, by your oath, by your very oath, Senator Babet.
They're not genuine everyday people that really care about you and your nation. And if they are, they've bent the knee, they've touched their toes to globalist interests. Stop voting for them, take a greater interest, and vote for minor parties and individuals and candidates that have proven that they care about your individual nations and support them. That's what I would say to those people.
And finally, outside of politics, what's your one great piece of life advice?
I'd just like to remind you all that Clive Palmer is just definitely an everyday Australian, right? That the fat cat that took the white papers over to America and read them on the plane over towards his federal executive buddies while trying to obtain a usufruct agreement for his mining under mineralogy. Is that the normal, everyday, working class Australian that you represent? Or you're all talking about party lines before, right? Vote for the party, not the representative. Vote for the party. Is this the Clive Palmer United Party that we're voting for at the moment? Like, do all the plebs have to vote? Do they have to vote for their own demise because they're paupers and they haven't realised the game yet? So I'm waiting now to hear what life advice you can give the working class.
I would say, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. Always follow your heart and always believe in yourself. I had a lot of people tell me that I couldn't do so many things in my life. And here I am today. I'm the Senator for Victoria in Australia in federal parliament. So always follow what you believe is the right path for yourself and don't listen to naysayers. It's natural human behavior to be risk averse or to say you can't do this or that or whatever it is. Don't listen to them. If you want to do something, grab it by the horns, go for it, and just do it.
So here's the sad part, Senator, that you need to realise. I didn't want to do this. You forced it upon me. You forced my whole entire life to change by sucking out every cent of value I ever had in my savings in a court case. You then undermined that court case and a judge was caught out lying in that very court case 3 times. A judge was then put through interlocutory application 6 times in the Northern Territory over one piece of evidence. And that had never been done before. Ever been done before. And then at the end, I watched a judge just decide to do what he wanted to do instead of follow the law. And it's all documented on the court record as to where I started, Senator. So you think that anybody wanted a choice in this matter to end up where we are today? You're sadly mistaken. This is the torture that you've put me through over the last 15 years, just trying to get justice on the table and put the truth of the matter on the table like has been put on the Supreme Court of New South Wales court record and the District Court of Queensland court record in 2021 and 2022. Senator, you're talking about wanting to do things and following your heart. Well, if I had followed my heart, Senator, I would have done things very different in my life and possibly would have never have rolled my car, having been in a severe distress at the time. That these are all realities that you as an Australian government have inflicted upon me as you have physically tortured me. At the letter of the law, tortured me within a correctional facility in New South Wales after committing no offence, Senator, after committing 0 offence, after trying to stop a police officer from committing an offence, Senator, I was sent to jail. All right? This is the disgrace that you are as a government, Senator, and it's starting to catch up with you. You need to look at who I am and realise that I ain't going away. This has come to the point where 15 years of watching you and your government commit heinous crimes against humanity, against all Australians, and then deny United Nations inspectors from inspecting the facilities wherein you created those offences directly. And those offences on the Supreme Court of New South Wales court record, Senator. And you senators continually ignoring what has been put on court record by your very own system itself, Senator. Okay, now we talk about your oath and the foreign curial power at which you've served in this country since it got here in 1954, Senator. Now, I'd like you to explain to me how, any way, shape or form, you claim to have sovereign status as a senator of Australia when your Australia didn't exist until it was created in 1973. I'd like you to explain this to the people, that the crunch time has come. Why has all of the empire countries been put into lockdowns, forced medical procedures, gone through torture, gone through all manner of international war crimes committed by the very crown at which you serve, Senator? And this is the harsh reality that we have come to, as I say. It is now on the court record that the New South Wales Police committed an actual war crime. An actual war crime. Okay, and we will be heading towards a courtroom. We just thought that the Australian government might want to do something about the fact that it is party to a very heinous crime against humanity at international law. Why it denied United Nations inspectors from its facilities and then laughed about the fact, Senator. Why you will not hold the states accountable under your Australia Act. This is all coming to fruition as we speak, because these are the crimes that you have technically committed, Senator. And you sit here on a stage asking these working class to continue being working class and not guardian them out of their pauperism, their poverty. And aren't you obligated under rules of usufruct to administer? And aren't you obligated as policy enforcers to guardian them in some way? Isn't this what taking over their estate is all about under Sesta QV? These are your obligations that you fail as an administering power, Senator. And it's been starkly pointed out to you that you're the ones undermining the Crown. The Australian Imperial Crown, the Imperial Crown of Canada, the Imperial Crown of New Zealand, the Imperial Crown of England, the Imperial Crown of South Africa. These are all things that you, in your St. Edward's Crown, have directly administered into poverty, Senator. And you have an opportunity to respond. You always have had an opportunity to respond, but instead of responding, you've been forced into silence by some sort of federal executive branch inside that government that controls all of your parties as corporations. As corporations, Senator. What are corporations doing even in the parliamentary process? Why is Liberal and Labor a corporation? Why is the UAP a corporation? Why is One Nation a corporation? Please explain this to all of the people, why their local representative can't represent them because they represent instead the party line of a corporation. Explain this to them, Senator. Is it because they're poor and they'll be treated like they're little wards of state that need to be guardianed by the states who threatened all of those international humanitarian law offences from the Office of Premier and Office of Governor? This is the crux of the matter, isn't it, Senator? Where did the COVID Task Force commander come from? That's the biggest question in itself. Now, Malcolm, you should keep following the line you're going on in your parliamentary inquiry. Diggy. Who's behind it all? And you're getting close. You're getting a little bit closer. But start targeting towards the military itself. Hey, Governor General, why'd you commit a war crime on Australian soil? That's the real question. Why'd you commit a war crime on Australian soil. So that was Senator Babet babbling on like an idiot, talking the rhetoric that everyone wants to hear, believing that he can talk for the state. That's the biggest Orwellian doublespeak of a bullshit video that I've seen in a long time, especially from the title, which said, let me just go back, what was the title here? Exposing the Corruption with Senator Ralph Babet. What he's actually doing is hiding the corruption by double-speaking the corruption, which is kind of amusing, really. And if you go right back to the beginning of part 1 and just watch that first 5 to 10 minutes of him explaining how his working class is just on the weekend, demonstrates very clearly the separation from patrician to plebeian that these people actually believe they have over the top of you. And he knows full well what's going on when he speaks like that and has joined the Senate and talks down to the Australian people, but acts like he's talking for you instead. It's kind of unbelievable that we've come to this kind of idiocy in our parliament, like from Lydia to this rhetoric to being attacked, being undermined, and they don't think that we can't see it and won't do something about it post fact. It is kind of laughable because they're starting to out themselves left and right while they all argue over a link or line of authority with God that's been defined on the Supreme Court record and could stand up right through the middle of all of them and take the reins because it is the true lawful authority under all of it. And then these people have a massive problem in what they privatised and who to. Who to? How'd they allow this monetary problem to go ahead in the first place? By privatising all of your assets instead of just administering them. It's gone so far above and beyond the rules of usufruct. It has turned into full-on international slavery, wherein they have attempted to genetically modify you with a DNA marker strain, which they were going to link to a monetary system called CDBC, and you only need to look at the HSBC's advertising where it said many years ago that your DNA would become your data. Therefore linking the bank, the HSBC, to your DNA itself. Okay? And we have Klaus Schwab on a world stage talking about he who takes a genetic modification, and that's the genetic modification that is a slavery system in a bankrupt empire where only that empire was affected all around the world, and self-admitted here by Mr. Babet himself. And that would mean the very oath that he's under would be demonstrative in Trudeau in Canada, for instance. It would be demonstrative of truck convoy. It would be demonstrative of rebel without a cause that you saw involved with Mr. Babet at the very beginning of the video, even though Avi wasn't involved in this video. It's directly demonstrative of the Canberra bubble that they've been allowed into, called an administration under the rules of usufruct by war criminal powers that have occupied your country since the pushing of the Menzies model going back as far as 1937. That's the reality of it. So I hope you enjoyed another episode of The Glass Ceiling, I suppose. We'll look for the next fool to bring forward to you all.